everybody, and welcome to Mom Cooks Fast and Slow. I'm Alex Sullivan, and I'm delighted to have you at my kitchen table. Today, I have Chris Demuth Jr. discussing a variety of topics with me. Chris is the founder of an event-driven hedge fund, Rangeley Capital. He is an active member of the new Canaan community, and most recently has become quite the CrossFit buff. What is so appealing about CrossFit to a man like Chris? In a time where many driving principles seem flipped upside down and all around, CrossFit is a community that values hard work, healthy competition, a commitment to nutrition, and a strong sense of community based on common interests. I really enjoyed this conversation with Chris about CrossFit and how some of the lessons learned can be applied to living our everyday lives. I hope you enjoy. Chris, welcome to Mom Cooks Fast and Slow.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you, Alex.
You too. I'm excited to have you on. We met kind of in the political sphere of New Canaan, but we were catching up the other day, and both of us were lamenting about how community, really nationwide has kind of fallen off. And we're both looking for pathways back to building back communities and making it the forefront for our kids and our families and our towns. And then we got to talking about CrossFit and how that has really become a community for you. And it was very interesting, our conversation that we had, because as we were talking, I was saying to myself, this kind of, the way you're describing CrossFit sounds kind of like the blueprint for how I instill values in my kids, how I approach community, how I approach, working with people from all different walks of life. And so I thought it would be an interesting conversation for us to have about the CrossFit community, how you found yourself in that community. You're now writing a Substack kind of about fitness and health, and how all of these things mesh together and has become a big part of your life and important to you. So I thought we could start out with, your bit of background about yourself, your path to finding CrossFit, and then we can get into the community of CrossFit and how that kind of translates to the rest of our lives.
Sure. This is all very new for me. So I spent my 20s and 30s really primarily focused on work. I kind of in my mid 40s, really after COVID, kind of joined a CrossFit gym where they were just getting rid of the kind of boxes representing where you're supposed to stand and masks and so forth. But hopefully I won't get anybody into trouble to say they were on the lenient extreme of rule following. Hopefully you're allowed to say that now. Yeah. There were people that I wanted to spend time with. They were doing something I wanted to do, but I really wanted to kind of throw myself back into the world. I had been sort of conscientiously thinking about, well, we have this certain amount of time by ourselves or in relative isolation, but I wanted to kind of throw myself back into a community, and this is the one that I found, but it's very recent and kind of new for me. And so I've kind of approached it with the zeal of an evangelist. I think about every morning at 4 a.m., I kind of nudge my wife and kind of ask her if she wants to come and do heavy squats or whatever we're doing. And she answers every morning. She hasn't come yet, but it's so relatively new thing for me. And just something that I've loved. I've kind of a couple other activities I've gotten into after work, but these are things where work's kind of settled enough that I can kind of do something else. And kind of a lot of the effort has been trying to figure out how to carve time and energy out of a big work commitment, a big family commitment, and then have kind of this third area of my life.
But what struck you as, what was the pull towards CrossFit that really said, yes, this is the community that I want to be involved in? What was so attractive about it?
So I was live in New Canaan, Connecticut, kind of had a few furtive efforts at other, not the right picks for me, gyms. Usually quiet, polite, clean. You'd kind of get in trouble if you dropped a weight, which at CrossFit, dropping bumper plates is kind of ubiquitous. It's loud. It's kind of there's a fun energy to it. And a friend of mine, Katie Ignuli, took me aside and said, I think you need to do something else. This isn't like I needed to go to a kind of the next town over that's a little bit more blue collar, a little, not a rough neighborhood, but a rougher neighborhood, kind of a back alley, literally kind of a warehouse kind of space. And so it was a better space, a very high energy, kind of between kind of the music, kind of all kinds of people, the clock, and the competitiveness that you're really like trying to do something hard together, where even the techniques are hard, the standards are high, and there's some people who are just in unbelievable shape, going to kind of very competitive elite levels, all the way down to regular people like me. And so that was really attractive.
So I want to dig into a little bit more of this idea of healthy competition because,
Mm-hmm.
the way you describe that is so attractive to me in terms of there are people on all different levels, people that are way better than you, some people that may be less as achievable as you are in CrossFit. And you're all competitive with each other, but you're all competitive with yourselves. And that is something that I really find valuable in raising children and how I think they should approach school. And I think that's a really important lesson for all of us to appreciate, to value, to learn. So can you talk about, I mean, like you said, you are with a bunch of people from all different walks of life that are on all different levels competing with each other. What does that look like in the CrossFit community? And how do you find that people actually thrive in those scenarios?
Sure. So there's a phrase, and I don't know if this is specific to our gym. Some of these things might be commonplace across the CrossFit world, but they say program for the best, scale for the rest. So that if you walked into our gym some morning and you were a kind of Olympic level athlete, you would have a hard workout for you. If you are a regular person coming off the street and you're new to fitness, if you're disabled, if you're anybody, 100% welcome, and a scaling is the equivalent of that exercise that most gets at the idea of what that exercise is working towards, that literally any human could do, any age, any physique, any disability, anybody. And so it's meant for everybody, but not by lowering standards. There's the standard we call the RX, the prescription, and an RX workout is hard. It's measured. Instead of making competition and winning and losing this kind of dramatic, scary thing, it's ubiquitous. It's literally every day you win or lose, and in my case, probably lose, or like always lose to somebody, and it's so constant, it becomes this kind of lighthearted, fun thing. And you usually have something you're working towards, either some technique that's new. So you get a muscle up for the first time, you get a double under for the first time, you get one of the more technical moves that for me takes months just to do one right. And another day you're going really heavy, another day you're going with a faster tempo. So you have some little sense of accomplishment, but for maybe a dozen people or a few dozen people, there is a really tangible reward. And they're the famous people. They might be on the podium this year. They might make some bucks. They might have a really big Insta following or something and monetizing this. But for like thousands and thousands of other people, including me, that's not in the cards. So it's kind of an infinity game. It's this game of like, okay, well, I have something I'm going to do. And if I do it right, it's really just a part of a bigger thing. You get your handstand push-ups, cool. You're just getting ready for handstand walks. You get your, pull-ups really good, cool. That's just a part of a muscle up. So everything's kind of like something that's kind of fun, but because it's health and fitness and longevity as well as performance, at the mass level, I'm doing stuff that there's really no end to of any kind of particular import. And so the competition is just everywhere. And, everything is a race. I mean, we have one day a week that's a not for time workout, but for the most part, you have this big red clock, the music starts, you're with a lot of peers that you kind of want to be somewhere in the mix with. And so even if I'm not, look at some guy and I'm not like, oh, I'm going to beat him. I'm like, well, I'm not that much worse than he is. I'm going to try to be within, a little kind of within, I want to be respectable. I want it to be okay. And then, the coaches you look up to and you want to do well for them. But the clock starts and, I have a heart rate monitor on my watch and I realize that my heart rate starts pounding just when the countdown for the 10 seconds, this big, but they have every emotional cue you can imagine between loud music, a big red clock up front, all of the kind of things that get you going psychologically to be your best. And even to the point where today was really one of the 2 mornings I ever think I went beyond what was healthy, safe, felt really good. You get to the point where it's your heart rate is just pounding so hard. You can taste your lungs bleeding. You can really, the potential to push yourself too far. I mean, the kind of rhabdo is kind of the CrossFit, cliche, going too hard in a workout. It's the official disease of CrossFit, but you have these things that you can do too much and then you realize, oh, I went over the line maybe 1 or 2 days over the past year. I've kind of been really doing this intensively for a year now. And then you realize, so when I say I'm at 100%, I'm really at 60% because I've been at 105% twice. Mm-hmm. And then I'm oh, so I'm kind of slacking all the rest of my life.
Only you would think that way, Chris. But do you think that are the coaches the ones that foster that feeling? Is it just the people that are attracted to CrossFit are all competitive in nature? Where do you think that healthy competition and pushing yourself and not holding it against others if they're better than you, where do you think that those feelings come from or are fostered from?
I think it's the people that are attracted to it. It's interesting. There is none of the shoutiness that you associate with high school coaches of a sport that you don't really want to do, where they're punitively telling people to run or kind of badgering people. I mean, there's literally none of that. And I actually read a comment that the CrossFit founder originally had made that actually specifically talked to that. That's a really intrinsic part of CrossFit culture, that they're attracting people and really only want people who so want to be there that if anything, they'd have to hold them back to pace themselves, that they wouldn't have to motivate or encourage, because these are self-motivated people who are encouraged to be there because they want to be better. So I think it's mostly the people who are there. And one of the things that I find so uplifting and so fun about it, and almost opposite everything you hear in our broader culture, certainly in our political context, in social media, in our kind of national conversation, is it is literally every kind of person you could imagine. I mean, you could, every conceivable, not just race, but race and socioeconomic and orientation, and just every kind of person, but they show up trying to do something hard together and get better. And you realize how much what we have in common is more important and more vivid than what separates us. And what separates us ends up being a kind of either benignly ignored or a topic of kind of occasional humor or levity, but not this kind of weighty thing. And in this terrible way in politics, I find that we always kind of have this solemn, we should have a conversation about invariably our differences. And I think, should we though? Because it feels like 90% of the time we're talking about it, and the other 10% of the time we're talking about it, and it just pisses people off more and more. Whereas people coming together who had the commonality of, we got to get this in around work. I mean, it's almost always people who are working in some respect. And it's almost always people who have families that they care about in some respect. And you realize people who are trying to provide for their families and raise their kids and be stronger and healthier and better versions of themselves for the example that they want to be, that's really powerful. And the differences are kind of don't matter as much. And that just seems to be so much better in terms of authentic connections where you say, oh, these are people who, for better or for worse, really know who you are. I mean, there's not a lot left to the imagination in terms of what you're wearing, how you're performing. You get so broken, people really see how strong you are and what you can do and what you can't psychologically, mentally, physically. You're early in the morning is like, you're not a mystery to these people. And then you realize, oh, I'm still okay. Like, the people who know me best still tolerate me is a really incredible thing. And having that mutual is really important. And so this kind of analog, in-person, authentic relationship is so wonderful, and it's kind of easy. And the things that people in the political context and national context make seem impossible, I think, are sort of self-defeating in their weightiness, in their fixating on superficialities, and on the kind of trying to make things the subject that is almost better just ignoring and moving on.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love. I mean, when you speak about it, that's what I love about hearing it so much, is because that's how I think about community and think about, it should be just this, we're all raising our kids and want the best for our future. And one day it'd be awesome if my kid went to Mars. Like, that sounds cool. That sounds awesome. The rest of it sounds dumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I, in that a similar vein, part of this and part of what kind of the national conversation is too, is about diet and health and sleep and how important things like that are to being able to do those things that make us happy. I'm not going to be a person that wakes up at 4:00 in the morning to go lift weights, but there are things that make me get out of the bed and want to strive to be my best self every day. And I can't do that without a good diet, a good health, and a good night's sleep. I'm a person that definitely needs her sleep. So I know this is something that you write about on your Substack a lot. And so I wanted to kind of dive into, your thoughts on all three of those three kind of pillars.
So all of this takes long, and I'm impatient. I want tangible metrics. I love measurements. I'm kind of borderline obsessive about every kind of health measurement you can think of. And if you start at the end and work back, what I want to be able to do, my big goal is, when there's somebody I like who's doing something cool, I want to be able to just reflexively say yes and do it. And that's my kind of goal with where I want my work to be, where I want my family to be, where I want my fitness to be. I was on a trail run with a friend of mine last year, and I said, hey, do you want to hike up Kilimanjaro? And she goes, yes. And the other people we were running with laughed and said, well, you're going to talk about it. And I said, oh, we just did. We're going to go. And we didn't say another word. And then we flew over to Tanzania. We hiked up Kilimanjaro, and we were completely serious. And they kind of conflict. And I said, that's exactly the conversation that I want to be able to have about, my next couple ultra marathons, my next couple lifting goals, my next couple mountain, kind of big mountain expeditions. I just want to pick the people, pick the date, pick the goal, and just be able to do it. And that requires a lot of training. And so the training is like, if somebody gives me 2 years and says, what should we do? It's like, okay, here's how to get stronger. Here's what we're going to do in the gym. But if you have 2 weeks, you're not going to make that much progress. But you can make a ton of progress with nutrition. Nutrition, really, you can feel a lot better. And one of the things I've thought a lot about is, instead of trying to make this battle between short-term and long-term, because it's not that vivid, and especially with kids, they like the short-term. This is delicious. This is fun. Is as I think of it as like, well, hedonism, which makes you feel good, but at least measured over the next 24 hours, not the next hour. Because a lot of things that even just selfishly can make you feel great is the really healthy, good food. And so I think that nutrition is really, really important. I've gotten to the point, and I'm sort of extreme, like once I kind of enter into a project, I do better just making it very rules-based than trying to be moderate. So I do better with like no refined sugar than moderating that, no alcohol than moderating that. I prepare all my own food now, which I enjoy doing. And I just think there's a huge amount in food prep that I feel a lot of, like, including like single dudes who only eat out, could really get out of health. I mean, my wife's a terrific cook, and has always loved it as a topic. And it's a totally new topic for me within this past year. But I mean, cooking is warming meat until it's warm. Like, it's not like you can like get a great steak, and even if you don't have a huge amount of money, if you take it out of your entertainment and alcohol budget, if you take out of like, oh, I could have gone to Vegas and bought all these, bottle service, and say, okay, that's zero. You can get any kind of fish you want from a fishmonger. You can get any kind of steak you want from a butcher for less money than that. And just really good produce and protein is just not that expensive. And so I order, I get from different sources, but I kind of, get big boxes of dry ice from all kinds of, I get this axe deer that I like from Hawaii. I get a bunch of bison and elk from Wyoming, and do all my prep myself. But for the next few weeks, you want to feel better. Like, nutrition is such a faster way to really feel tangible improvements. People say, abs are made in the kitchen, not the gym. There's a lot you can do from cooking. It's fun. And as I've kind of cracked down on my pretty specific diet goals, my kids have all gotten into cooking because they realize it's the one thing I'll let them do, because they'll bake and they'll make themselves desserts, because they realize I let them do that, even though I won't buy like processed desserts and stuff. So they've all kind of gotten into it, which has been fun to see. And then if you want to feel better in the next couple hours, take a nap. I mean, I went through every conceivable recovery gimmick in this past year. I mean, just everything, and was doing all this cryotherapy and doing every kind of massage, some of which is like better than nothing, but for the most part, nothing works. Just get some sleep. And so I think in terms of scheduling, a 9-hour sleep opportunity window, so you can really, really sleep 8 hours each day. If you're lifting heavy, if you're running, getting a lot of miles, and you almost have to be able to recover. If you're really not taking full recovery days, which I don't, you got to sleep a lot.
So if you wake up at 4, you're in bed by 8?
I go to bed at 6:30, fall asleep at 7:30. Yeah. So I'm my kids love this routine because I'm by far the first person to go to bed. So like, I kind of have vaguely parental admonitions at about 6 or 6:30, and they're like, sure, old man, dude, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, don't stay up all night. They're like, oh, sure. Okay.
Sure. Okay, Dad. Yeah.
Like, you have absolutely no credibility whatsoever. So I find an hour to kind of, I fire myself for making any important decisions or any communication that's like, I try to really front load my day. So like and one thing that was useful is my doctor was kind of looking at how I best focus and realistic expectations for intensive work when you have important decisions to make, especially things where you could actually like really screw things up. So it matters to be at 100%. And his standard is really 4 hours a day of intensive work. And each of those hours have a 10-minute break. So 10 minutes outside moving around, 50 minutes. But I mean, this is serious focus. This isn't like making sure nobody's wrong on the internet while you're doing it. Like 4 serious hours and then 4 more hours of lesser. So I'm trying to pack my workday into 8 hours as much as possible, and then kind of unwind a little bit after the market closes after 4, and then done at 6:30, asleep at 7:30, awake 3:30, 7 days a week. And 7 days a week really helps too, because I set an alarm that I always can reach for it and turn it off like a minute before it goes off. So it's like I have the same kind of like biological rhythm. And then 5 days a week, it's CrossFit first, and 2 days a week, it's trail running first.
So how do you, that's a pretty intense schedule. How do you manage this? I mean, it seems like more of a hobby to you. It's now like a way of life. And having that time that I know is super important to you with your family.
So the two things that really made a difference to me is, one, there was a while that I kind of would backlog things that I knew weren't going to go anywhere with work, where somebody would call and say, hey, can you call back after 4? The market's still open. I need to kind of think about other things. And once I got into fitness this past year, I stopped doing that. I said, somebody called and said, hey, we're just not going to do business. This is not going to go anywhere, and it's not going to like serve your needs any more than mine. Could you just like leave that as my actual answer, and I'm not going to kind of drag this because I realized I knew the things that I would drag on for a few weeks. Like
Mhm.
there's some kind of applicant, some kind of and so I just got much more decisive about saying no. And then with kids, I think that there's this kind of martyr complex, more common with moms than dads, but at least to some extent where somebody likes the identity of being self-sacrificial and saying, hey, I'm always going to be there for my kids. Well, I am not always there for my kids. Sometimes I'm on a date with their mom and they're not coming. And sometimes I'm always there for my kids in an emergency. And I do a lot with them. My daughter and I rock climb together. One son runs with me, another does CrossFit with me. So I do a lot, but we do things that are important for both of us together. And probably controversially, I don't spectate. I don't spend a lot of time where I'm spending my hour or two watching them do something important for them. We do things together that really, for me, I've found a way since they were babies, but increasingly with fitness, where we have some way to do it together. So 5 a.m. Sunday morning, I had hill repeats to do. So I had this one hill, and I thought this is a perfect kid activity because unlike a trail run where I could be like 10 or 20 miles from the car by the time it's time to turn around, that's kind of a problem if you have a kid and they say, hey, I'm done. It's like, you're not done. We got to get home somehow. We don't live in the woods here. But I'm like, oh, this is great because this is just, you're only going to be half a mile from the car doing these repeats. But I have a weight vest and I have a rucksack, so I can always add, 20 pounds up to 80 pounds, and I can go with a kid and do something that's like hard and cool for them and something that's hard and cool for me. And so we can go out in the woods and do something. And then by the time I'm done, like I got my morning in, we go out to breakfast together and we're kind of like regaling each other with stories of like how hard it was for both. Like we did a real thing together. This wasn't just me babysitting my kids. But I wore my vest, and with enough weight, we could kind of equalize and make it an activity together. And it was awesome for the kid too, because one of the things we do before an ultra is we get the exact food that we're going to eat on the course. So in this case, I'm going to be racing in Eiger in Grindelwald, Switzerland. A lot of vert, and you need to be careful about, you're running all day. You need to be careful about food. So we got all the food so we had all these like caramel waffles and all these different things. And so he was sitting there just like gorging on all of our food for this. So I really try to find activities that we can all do that's like the real stuff, not just like me watch. And maybe, it's controversial. I'd say almost all New Canaan dads, to the extent they're doing stuff with their kids, are like watching them do something. And for me, I think that it's really important for everybody to get to do the thing that's like living their life and running their race and doing it in a way that avoids the potential for resentment, where you say like, hey, I helped you live your life instead of this other thing that I was going to do. We kind of try to find things that really have a lot of value for time together, but also in the like activities that we're really trying to progress in.
I do love that. I do like I enjoy my kids so much more when we are doing stuff together. My kid, I cook every night. My kids help me cook every night. It's something we do together. They are part of the process. And I do feel like a lot a lot of the lamenting of parents that, oh, I gotta like deal with my kids or whatever. Not in, we all love our children. We're all, obviously. But it feels like quote unquote childcare. But like what you're saying, if you are including them in whatever you're doing, it's not childcare. It's spending time with your kids, it's making memories, it's doing things that you enjoy and what your family enjoys, which is, I don't know if my kids are doing what your kids are doing, but your kids are enjoying it. That's important. That's part of your family tradition and how you guys are building memories. And same for me. We all have different ways of doing it, and that's okay. And that should be part of our own community building too. Is every family is going to look a little different in how we do family, but as long as we're doing it with our kids and they feel loved, then whatever way that is great.
Yeah.
So I like to hear all kind of different ways people bond with their kids because it's fun. It's interesting. Um, so kind of speaking towards our kids, are there values and lessons that, I mean, you run a hedge fund, so the competitive kind of nature has probably always been in you. But are there values and lessons that you've learned through CrossFit that you didn't learn beforehand? And are some of those values that you would like to pass on to your kids? You know, how does that look?
Mistakes and weakness is just a constant and cheerful, unavoidable part of my life. If I look at with work, if I look at the kind of gross, not on a net basis, hopefully, my winners kind of pay for my losers and then leave a little at the end of the day. But on a gross basis, the things that I've done wrong, if you say, it's a pretty good antidote to perfectionism that I say, like, I did this thing. It was 100% my fault and it was a disaster. And you could have a good year or even a spectacular year where 1 or 2 days a week, you have real mistakes that you made. And so getting away from perfectionism and the anxiety associated with being performative, it is such a lost cause for me. I mean, the imperfections are so glaring with work, but with CrossFit, I'd say it's even more tangible. I mean, the literal weakness, just the being, totally spent so you can't stand up at something you're trying to do. Because I think a lot of the kind of culture around being sarcastic or being dismissive, like, oh, well, that wasn't that good, but I wasn't really trying. Well, I am really trying. I really care. There's no excuse. This is me at my best, and it sucks sometime, and it is way less good than I want to do, way less good than some dudes within like arm's reach are doing. So it's like, say, oh, it's not possible. Well, apparently it's possible because there's other people right there that are doing it. That humility, that kind of just total destruction of ego, and the fun of doing hard things and the fun of doing hard things together. And so I think that kind of is, I mean, it's a cliche. It's like, it's one of the truest cliches, but it's to say, oh, they copy what you do, not what you say. But I mean, in this case, they really do. And it just becomes to the point where when you're talking about your own failures, you might as well be talking about somebody else. It's not an emotional thing. It's not a big deal. And our ability to communicate in ways where when there's something that's gone off course, we can fix it because we're just looking at it. I mean, kind of one of the things, this is such a dad comment, but I say, big problems are just small problems that you don't confront head on and fix. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the small problems that I say, like, look, this was just, that wasn't good. We have to fix it. But we can do that. And 5 minutes from now, it's going to be over. I think that we have a kind of more honest relationship and a more direct one, the more that we've seen those super tangible weaknesses and failures revealed in just the starkest possible ways.
I love that. That's great. All right. So before I ask my last question of the episode, if people want to read your Substack, want to read about, where can we find that?
So Substack, Valetudo, Valetudo. It's roughly Portuguese, anything goes. So it's kind of the origin of this, and it's a year old this month, was I kept wanting to talk about health and fitness things amongst some of my investors, colleagues, people in the professional kind of finance world that did not care about this. So I just needed to have something that was separate. So I wasn't working into investor letters or whatever, this stuff. So this was just stuff that I care about. So this is CrossFit. It's a little bit of jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and trail running adventures, different stuff. But it is kind of my struggles with these different things, very much from the perspective of trying to write to peers that similarly are trying to balance kind of the chaos of work and family and fitness, and also the process of trying to be thoughtful about kind of I'm in my mid 40s and thinking about, I so love little kid stuff. I want a big part of my life being able to do stuff with my grandkids and great grandkids. I want to be able to take my great grandkids, helicopter skiing for a month. Well, I got to save up some money. I got to make sure I have a lot of flexibility with my time, and I have to take care of my joints and be fit enough that when, I'm 100, I can say, hey, do any of the great grandkids want to go hop in a helicopter and go skiing in Alaska for a month? that kind of starting at the end and working back, that's where I want to end up. And so the longevity and for me, my observation was there are people who are on the, especially like in the world of general practitioners, you can find somebody who just wants to be a safety maximalist and say, hey, you could be a chemistry experiment in a nursing home for a decade if you eat this kale. And I say, that's not really my goal. Like I don't want to see how long I can live in a nursing home. I want to see how many years I can ice climb for. And mountains are consequential. There are things that are risks, but they're risks that I want to take to have as much kind of vigorous lifespan as possible with my family, doing cool stuff with people who tolerate me. And so this was kind of writing about that. So this past year, Substack, Valley Tudo, check it out if you're interested.
Awesome. Well, you'll definitely be the coolest granddad around if that comes to fruition. So I hope to see it one day. All right. So to end the interview, this is the same question I ask everyone at the end of every episode. What is your favorite family tradition and why?
Favorite family tradition, going up to Maine. There's the kind of south shore of Rangeley Lake. My hedge fund's Rangeley Capital, named after this lake. And it is now, my kids are kind of fourth generation up there. And it is kind of the mountains of Western Maine. And they have a little mini version of all the stuff that I like. So I kind of spent endless hours researching, and in some cases, getting something that only the people at the companies had made for themselves, like a mini version of like a little kayak and a little bow and arrow set and a little 22 rifle and a little like all these things that they at young ages could kind of do all of the kind of outdoorsy stuff that I loved on this wonderful lake in Maine. And so we do that really as much as possible. I mean, we say summers, but whenever we're out of school, if there's not another specific commitment, we're there as much as possible. And it's just a lovely piece of Americana. It's a very small town. And one of the things that was vivid to me when I was a kid that I think my kids have picked up on is we're doing all sorts of adventures in a place where the nearest emergency responders, like 45 minutes away, an hour away in the summertime. In the wintertime, if there's a blizzard, they might be a week away, and the roads could be closed. So you have to look at each other and say, hey, we have to take care of each other. And I don't mean this in a, you might hurt your feelings way. Like, we have to take care of each other. And I remember when I was a little kid that was so important to me, that I was like, I had this role where I could actually we had to help each other. And as a family, I just loved that. And I love that my kids love it now. And so Maine each summer, kind of time in the lake, long distance swims in cold water and kind of messing around in the woods, messing around in the boats.
Well, that sounds awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. This was an awesome conversation, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Alex. It's been great talking with you.